Yeah, so welcome back. Got a little bit more done. Got the all the cutting for the main galley cabinet done. As you can see behind me, I've got the alcohol electric stove located and the sink located, and figured out where I'm going to put the faucet. Made sure all the clearances are good. This is all just currently clamped into place and just kind of sitting there just for test fitting. Next, I'm going to start working on figuring out the upper part of the cabinets to cover all of that mess back there, and where I'm going to put the electrical panels and things like that. So I showed some of this in one of my earlier videos, but try to explain what I did here. Working in a boat like this is sometimes a bit challenging because the boat itself is not necessarily sitting level. The trailer isn't level, and very few things in the boat are perfectly square because, hey, it's boat shaped. So what I had to do to start building galley cabinets was to create a vertical or plumb line for me to measure from. So what I did was I taped this string to the top of the stringer, knowing where I wanted the bottom of the cabinet to be, and then just by eye lined the string up to be lined up parallel to the side of the door frame that leads into the cabin. Since that's a part I'm not changing, and I thought I'll call that vertical and then line everything else up to that. So I did that, put the string in here, and then measured from the string out to the hull in various distances from the bottom going up, and then cut a piece of cardboard initially as a template, and then cut this plywood end piece. Tested the plywood, made sure it fit nicely, and then measured from there and cut a piece for the front, essentially a rectangular piece with a notch out of one end that I'm going to have to notch a little bit more because of an existing metal bracket that's in the way. Figured out the location where I wanted the fridge, cut out the hole for the fridge, as well as this other rectangle with the rounded corners that's going to be an access for a storage cabinet. Will either be a drawer or a door. I haven't decided which yet, but that will also be my access to hook up the plumbing and the electrical of the various appliances that are going in here. So the fridge that's going in the hole is the used Norcold 12 volt, 110 volt fridge that I picked up a couple of weeks ago. And I also needed to make sure that I had enough clearance above the fridge for the stove. So anyways, cut those holes. For the jigsaw that I'm using, the jigsaw blade, since I'm marking my cuts on the top, the good side of the plywood, I use a down cutting jigsaw blade because that way it cuts on the downstroke and doesn't splinter the wood or the finish at the top, the good side of the wood. If you use a regular jigsaw blade, it cuts on the upstroke and it will tend to tear splinters away from the top side of the wood. So that's why I use that kind of a blade. The larger square hole will be where the fridge will go in. The other hole with the rounded corners is going to be a storage cabinet. I haven't decided yet whether it's a hinged door or a tall drawer. I'll figure that out. The height of the cabinet, I figured out how much clearance I need for the height of the fridge, as well as the depth of the stove in the sink. The stove is really the determining factor. But I couldn't go too high because, as you can see, if I go any higher than this, the top of the cabinet will start blocking the window. So I have to keep it below the window. So it's kind of about a 1/2 inch range that I have to keep the height in. So anyway, I think this is basically how it's going to go. The stove will have to be turned sideways, so the stove will go right here, and then the sink will go over here. Because this is where the original cabinet ended at that shelf. I thought of making it a little bit longer this way, but then I don't have enough room to sleep on the bed. So I tried when it was clear in here laying down, so I kind of have to leave the cabinet where the original was, or the bed's going to be too short. What I need to figure out now is the dimensions of a board that I need to cut for the side right here. It's going to go down the side of this and to meet the hull. The problem is that the hull isn't square, it's a weird shape. So I'm going to cut a cardboard template to fit that, and here's a piece of cardboard. A little bit crooked, but it'll work for template. I mean, a little bit curled because it got wet at some point. But I've already cut it to be the right height for that space. And the left side I've cut with the square to be a 90-degree angle to make sure it's square. So what I will do now is I will just take a series of measurements, maybe from the bottom at 6-inch increments at the top, out from here out to the hull, and then transfer those measurements to here, out to here, and that will give me a line that I'll cut with the knife and then test fit the cardboard in. Once I get the cardboard fit in there, then I can use that cardboard as a template to cut the piece of plywood that needs to go in there. Or that's the plan. So I got the other piece. For inside, I just used some rougher plywood because it's not going to be seen by anybody once we put the cabinets in and everything. I just need it for the support. So I cut the template out of cardboard and put that piece in. It's not quite sitting where it's supposed to, that's why it's not covering that hole, but for now it's just supporting the top. And then I cut a piece of plywood for the cabinet top, and it's sitting square, level, well, both's not level, but basically 90 degrees to the doorpost, since I have to figure out something's vertical in the boat. So I'm going from that and using that as my plumb line for everything else being square to that and calling that level. Of course, the window goes at an upward slope toward the front to the bow of the boat, so that doesn't sit square with the counter, but that's the way it is. It's part of working on a boat. And like I said, this is the maximum height for my cabinet, because any higher and I'd be blocking the window. If I go any lower, I don't have much room between the bottom of the stove and the top of the fridge. So that's kind of the height I need to do it at. In case anybody's wondering, these edges of exposed plywood, I'm planning on covering, once I stain this, covering those with teak. I have some free teak. If you look back in one of my older videos on my smaller boat, I found a bench in the corner of my yard that was an old outdoor teak bench, and once we dug into the paint and everything, we realized that it was perfectly good teak in there. So I'm going to rip some of that to make trim for this cabinet to hide all of the exposed plywood edges. That's the plan anyway. We'll see how it turns out. I'm not a fine grade carpenter. I don't pretend to be. I don't even fake it very well. I just try to make things work. At this point, I'm trying to figure out positioning for the stovetop and the sink. So I've got the glass lid off the stove. It's pretty much the outside size of the stove. On the hinge side, it's, maybe a 1/4 inch or 3/8 of an inch wider than the glass, but that's okay. It's good for figuring out locations. Got the sink laying there upside down, trying to figure out how I'm going to position all of this. I'm going to go inside and go grab the faucet I have for it as well. So I have this faucet that I ordered online a long time ago, probably a year or so ago. Anyway, I'm going to have to figure out, see if I can actually fit in here. Hopefully I have enough room for it. Thinking of where I should put it, wondering if I should put it over here. No, the sink is going to be below that. The fridge is going to be below that, so that's not going to work. I suppose I could, yeah, I think if I put it into the corner over there, that's probably going to be the best location. Just finished cutting the countertop and now test fitting the stovetop into the countertop before I bring it into the boat to test for clearances with that and the sink. So, the stove is in. Looks like it'll work just fine. Looked underneath. Plenty of clearance for the fridge. Nothing's protruding below that level. The sink drain is going to be to the right of the fridge, so that's not going to be a problem. And I can put the faucet right back here. Won't get in the way of any walls or cabinet work I do up at the top here. So I think this is going to work. Now I'm going to start trying to figure out what I'm doing with the rest of the cabinet work so it doesn't interfere with anything else. So, like I said, I got the countertop and the cabinet work for the main galley cabinet all cut, temporarily located in place. I got my stove top to fit, I've got the sink to fit, I know where I'm going to put the faucet right here. This stuff's all going to have to come back out. The wood's going to get stained with a cherry stain. The edges will later be trimmed with some teak that I'm getting from an old bench reclaiming the wood. The cabinets will not actually be installed permanently until the vinyl hull liner is in here, because then it can kind of tuck in behind the cabinets and hide the edges. But I think that's all I'm going to do for this video. My next step is I'm going to leave this cabinet in temporarily and start figuring out what I'm doing for a wall here and the cabinet work up here, and where I'm going to put the electrical panels. My thinking is I will probably put my 12-volt fuse panels down in here somewhere, because this is where all these wires come right now, and build like a storage cabinet here for the galley, and then probably over there above that window at the side I'll build a cabinet over there and put my shore power electrical panel there, so it's not right above the sink and the stove. But anyway, that's just kind of my thoughts right now. Until next time, hope you guys are staying healthy, and hopefully I'll get some video out fairly soon again, because I've got lots of time on my hands.